Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this electric estate car is the MG5. As more and more electric vehicles get onto the roads, we see them in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. We've got hatchbacks, SUVs and even saloon cars. But oddly enough, we've not had any electric estate vehicles until now with this MG5. Now, before you berate me in the comments section, yes, I know Porsche have just released the Taycan Cross Turismo, but MG got there first. And I've had this MG5 for a week, and I'm going to let you know if it's the perfect family EV for those on a budget. Now, when it comes to the MG5 styling, I'm going to be honest, I'm not quite convinced by it. I mean, it looks like a Volkswagen Passat from the front. No, not the current generation, a couple of generations ago, which means it kind of looks dated already. Now, I've got no complaints with the back end of the MG5. It looks very curvaceous and very modern. I'm just gutted that it just looks so plain at the front. Especially when you look at the ZS and HS with the Galaxy grille, it just looks far more modern in comparison. Now, I do like the fact that we've got the nice generic estate shape, and also we've got the small 16-inch alloy wheels. So granted, they don't fill up the arches, but it clearly shows that this car is meant for comfort and not sporting prowess like a Porsche Taycan. Also, if you look at the wheel arches, it actually looks like it's raised up a little bit, and you'll find out later that does aid in driving comfort. But yeah, I am disappointed with the MG5 styling, and also if you do Google MG5, you will be presented with a number of pictures of a very good looking car. Now, that is an MG5, but it's being sold in China and not here just yet, again, which is very disappointing. Now, just like the ZS EV, when it comes to charging your MG5, we have got a cover here on the front, but it opens sideways and not upwards, which I prefer because it means you can see where the plug point is. And you've got AC and DC plugs as standard, so it does help with regards to home charging, 50 kilowatt charging, and on the long range version of the MG5, 100 kilowatt charging as well. And as you can hear, there's no squeaks on this particular car. But yeah, overall, I just wish MG had put a bit more effort into the 5 in terms of its overall styling, considering the fact how good the ZS and the HS look. But you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the outside of the MG5. Let's have a little look at that interior. Sat in the front of the MG5, you are greeted by a very comfortable and nicely laid out interior. You can easily do a long journey here in the 5. Now, getting in and out of the car is relatively easy, but what you find is when you sit yourself in the driver's seat, you do sit quite high up. I mean, I'm 5'7" tall, yet I feel like a 6-footer in here. And there is electric adjustment on the driver's seat, but it doesn't go down any further. So if you are a tall driver, you might find it's a little bit cramped in here and that your eye level is quite high up. Now, when talking about the passenger seat, you have got adjustment in that in terms of sliding forward and back and in reclining the seat, but there's actually no height adjustment. And again, I've had somebody who's my height sat in the passenger seat, and they did feel that they were sat quite high in here. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, in regards to kind of getting in and getting out, it is pretty easy. However, if you've got any mobility issues and you do want an electric car, I do recommend the MG ZS EV over the MG5 in terms of getting in and getting out, because that will definitely be easier for you. But then, as I said, once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seat itself is very comfortable. Not the most supportive, but then again, this is actually built for comfort and not sporting prowess. But it is actually fine for longer journeys. And on this exclusive model, we do get leather seats, and they are heated. Now, there is a good amount of adjustment in them, but as I said, I'd like the seat to go a little bit lower. And also with the steering, we have both rake and reach adjustments, so getting the ideal driving position is easy. When it comes to interior quality, yes, there are a lot of hard, scratchy plastics, but we have got some leatherette trim here on the dashboard and on the doors to liven up the cabin. We've also got some here on the side of the centre console, which is nice to rest your knee on a longer journey. Don't forget, this is a budget EV, and if it didn't have the batteries and had a standard engine up front, this would probably cost between, say, £17,000 and £19,000, and not the £25,000 because they've gone electric. So that is something to consider when you're sat in here looking at the quality of the plastics. But you do get a lot of car for your money. Cubby spaces in the MG5 are pretty good as well. We got some decent sized door bins where you can get a medium sized bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Then ahead of the air conditioning controls, we've got a little area where you can put your phone, but it's mainly to cover the USB charging ports and 12-volt socket. And as you can see, I have got my phone here just kind of tethered up, and if I just put it in sideways, it does fit nice and snug. Just don't put it in heightways, otherwise it will go off once you go around a corner. So just something to be aware of. However, there is like a dedicated area to put your phone on the side of the center console, but you just need a long enough charging cable for it to go in there. Then we have got a couple of cup holders which are of various depths and sizes, and they're good for holding something like a coffee cup, a medium-sized bottle of drink, or an energy drink on the one further back. And next to there we have got a little cubby space which is good for putting things like the key in there and just kind of keeping it tucked out the way. Then underneath the armrest we have got a little bit of additional space, but compared to rivals they do a better job, but it is handy and it does cover up quite nicely. And then we have got the glove box, which again is of a decent size. It's not lined with any fabric, but what I do like about MGs, despite the fact that this is an EV, the book pack is actually relatively small, so it does mean you've got more space in there to put things, which is very handy. And that's pretty much it in the MG5 in regards to cubby spaces. It's pretty good, but as I said, most of the areas don't have any fabric in them, so loose items will rattle around a bit. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty good there. Now when it comes to buttons, there are a few in here, but they are easy to use, especially when on the move. So just behind the first little cubby space, we have got your air conditioning controls. It is single zone climate control on this exclusive trim, but it is very easy to use when on the move. Then just behind there, we have got your drive mode select as a part of a rocker switch, and we've also got your KERS button as well, and that's your kinetic energy regeneration system, or your regen braking. Now there are 3 levels to that, 1, 2 and 3, 1 being the lightest and 3 being the heaviest in regards to the regen braking. Then behind there we have got your gear select dial, and it's nice and easy to use when on the move, and I do like the big P in the centre, and you press that for parking once you've parked up. And then just behind there we have got your electric parking brake and also the auto hold button as well. And then we have got the main infotainment system, which is just the same as you get on any other MG car. It's pretty good to use when on the move. It's not the quickest, I will be honest, but you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that is absolutely fine and very handy when you're on the move. And then behind the steering wheel we have got a couple of analog dials, the speedometer on the left, and we've got like a charging gauge on the right hand side, so it's very easy and clear to use when you're on the move. And then we have got a 7-inch display in the centre, and you can go through various driving modes and data as you're driving along, and again nice and clear and easy to read when on the move, and it doesn't kind of bombard you with information, which is very handy. Now something I'll mention before we go sit in the back is that on the centre part of the console here we have got a lot of piano black plastic, which as you know is prone to smudging and scratches. But I've also found whilst having the car parked up on a sunny day is that this area does get very hot, and it also creaks a bit as well when you're driving, so that's just something to be aware of. And what's also happened is that the gear select gets very hot as well, and you tend to like not want to move it whilst it's stationary. You want it to cool down a little bit. So again, just something to be aware of if you're looking at the MG5. But I think that's enough of sitting in the front of this MG. Let's see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the MG5, it's actually not too bad back here. Now firstly I will point out there's a little bit of a sloping roofline, so as you're getting in and out of the MG5, just be mindful not to knock your head on the top of the door frame, and that's something I've done a couple of times. However, once you're sat in here, you find it is actually really comfortable, and with that driver's seat set to my driving position, I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide. As you can see, I've got a decent amount of knee room, and headroom is not too bad either. You could get a couple of 6-footers in here for a short journey, but definitely not 3 adults. 3 kids, maybe at a push. Now speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and there's no covers for them, so the bars are nice and exposed and easy to affix a child's seat. Cubby spaces are pretty good in here as well. We've got some very decent sized door bins, and you can get a medium sized bottle of drink in there. We have got a couple of airplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, and we've also got an armrest which pulls down as well, and we've got a couple of additional cup holders, so that is really handy. However, there's no through loading into the boot. Now in terms of features, we have got a couple of USB charging ports on the back of the centre armrest, so that's very handy for anyone back here wanting to charge their mobile devices. And it does feel nice and light and airy back here. The windows are of a decent size, and they do allow a lot of light in, and they do open as well all the way down, so that's very handy. Also, we have got the windows in the C-pillars, so therefore it does give that nice airy feel to it, and I think as well the lighter roof lining does help with that as well. So all in all, it's actually pretty spacious back here, and it is turning out to be a pretty decent family EV. Now I think it's time we go to the back of the car and have a look at that boot. Opening the boot on the MG5 presents you with 464 litres of space, when compared to its rivals is actually really decent. There's only one car that beats it as an EV, and that's the MG ZS EV, which has about an extra 5 litres or so, so really they're kind of like for like. Now granted, yes, if you compare the MG5 to something like a Skoda Octavia, then it is going to lose out, but as a pure EV, this does actually get close to top of the class. Now, in regards to the boot opening itself, it's nice and square and easy to get a couple of suitcases in there. However, you do have to navigate a pretty substantial load lip, and when it comes to features, there aren't any. Just like the ZS EV, we've got no 12-volt socket, we've got no tethering hooks, but we have got a little extra cubby space here on the left and on the right-hand side to put your charging cable, and as you can see, we've also got a little bag for your 3-pin charging cable as well. Then underneath the boot floor, we have got space for a spare wheel, but on this particular car we've just got a tyre puncture repair kit. And if you do decide to put the seats down, you do find that there's a bit of a lip at the base of the seats, so loading any large, heavy, bulky items in there could be a little bit tricky, so that's just something to be aware of. But all in all, in terms of a family car, this is a very decent amount of boot space, and it actually is going to be very handy for you if you are taking the whole family away for a week vacation. But you know what, I think that's enough of looking at the practicality side of the MG5. Let's take it for a drive. So once you get driving in the MG5, first impressions are actually really positive. It's a very comfortable and easy car to drive. Visibility for the most part is really good as well. We've got some relatively thin A-pillars, and I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. The wing mirrors are of a decent size as well, but they do give off a little bit of wind noise. And then looking over your shoulder, you find that the C-pillar is not too big as well, so all-round visibility is pretty good, apart from if you're looking in the rear view mirror directly behind you, because there are 3 large headrests obscuring your view. So if I could ask MG if they could look at getting those ones that kind of slide into the top of the rear seats, that would definitely aid with all-round visibility, which for the most part is really good. So yeah, first impressions of the MG5 are looking very positive. Now there are 2 trim levels to choose from in the MG5 range. There's the entry-level Excite and the top of the range exclusive, which is what I've got here. However, it does also depend on which version of the MG5 you go for when it comes to batteries, because I've got the standard version of the MG5 and that does not come with MG Pilot, but if you go for the long range version of the MG5 then it does. So if you are very safety conscious, and of course you're going to look at this as a family wagon, then safety is going to be a priority for you, and I would not recommend going for this version of the exclusive. Just go for the long range. In terms of standard kit on this exclusive without the MG Pilot, I've got heated leather front seats, I've got cruise control, I have got a reversing camera and rear parking sensors, and I have got a plethora of airbags, of course, throughout the cabin. But at the time of recording, this hasn't been through its Euro NCAP safety test, and my guess is if this one went through, it would probably get something like 3 stars, which isn't exactly the best considering it's a 5-star safety system. But if you went for the one with MG Pilot and the longer range battery, we'll definitely be looking at 4, possibly even 5 stars. So if you are very safety conscious, that's the one to go for. So there are 2 batteries to choose from in the MG5 range. There's the entry-level battery, which is what I've got here, and it's a 52.5 kilowatt per hour battery with a claimed range of 214 miles according to MG. But I do believe them, because the first time I charged the MG, I actually had 200 miles range, but it took 10 miles of driving for that range to start dropping, so I was very impressed by that. Now there is of course a long range version of the MG5, and that comes with a 61 kilowatt per hour battery and a claimed 250 miles of range, and that is my pick of the batteries, because not only do you get that longer range, but you also get 100 kilowatt charging as well included, so that's definitely handy if you do lots of long distance driving. but also the fact that you get MG Pilot as well. So if you are very safety conscious and you do have the family in the car, then that's definitely a no-brainer for you. And in terms of cost, well, between this version of the exclusive MG5 and the long-range version, it's about 1,500 quid, which in terms of specs is really hardly anything. So that is why it's pretty much a no-brainer to go for the long-range version of the MG5, because you get all the safety kit plus a bit of extra range, and it's not too much more in terms of cost. I mean, I can't really see this version of the MG5 lasting much longer, especially as it doesn't come with MG Pilot. So there's not really much to think about there. Go for the long-range version, job done. Now, charging the MG5 is actually pretty good as well. So if you use a 3-pin socket, you're looking at a full charge in about 18.5 hours. So if you leave it overnight, you should be around 50%. If you use a 7 kilowatt charger, you're looking at around 8.5 hours. So again, if you plug it in at the beginning of your work shift, by the time you finish, it'll all be charged up for you. Now, if you use a 50 kilowatt charger, you can go from 0 to 80% in around 50 minutes. And if you use a 100 kilowatt charger, apparently it should do the same in around about 40 minutes. So again, it's another reason to go for that long range version of the MG5. So it's actually pretty handy when it comes to charging capabilities, and it does mean that you can really do some long range driving, and it's not going to take too much time out of your day to charge it up. So that is really handy, especially with the 100 kilowatt charging. Of course, with a lot of EV cars nowadays, you do get your drive mode select, but you also get your regen braking select as well, and the same can be said for the MG5. Now, in typical drive modes, we've got Sport, Normal and Eco, and you're going to spend 90% driving in either Eco or Normal, but I do like putting it in Sport because the acceleration is lovely and instant, and it does feel fun when you need to overtake, even though it's got the equivalent of about 156 brake horsepower. I was going to put that back into Eco there. But what I do like actually as well is that when you put it into Sport mode, the regen level stays the same, and I've been driving this MG5 with the strongest level of regen braking, level 3, which means you can kind of put your foot down, overtake someone, but when you're coming to a halt, you can take your foot off the accelerator and you've got a decent amount of regen braking. Now, it's not as strong or as abrupt as something like a Nissan Leaf with its e-pedal, but you can drive, I reckon, about 80% of the time without having to use the brake pedal, because you can get to a point where you can just judge how good the regen is and how much kind of distance you need between you and the end of the junction or the car in front before you need to apply the brake. So every so often you might just need it to bring the car to a halt, but for the most part, yeah, you pretty much can just drive on the accelerator pedal. But as I said, it's not as abrupt as Nissan's e-pedal. That one really is the best in class. So what's the ride and handling like in the MG5? Well, ride-wise, I've really been impressed by it. I mean, this has dealt with the bumps and imperfections like a much more premium feeling vehicle. I really am that impressed by it. Now, the road I'm going down now is a bit of a B road, and it's not the flattest, but for the most part, it deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. And yes, every so often you will come across a big manhole cover or a big pothole, and you do get that boom and vibration coming into the cabin. Now, the only trade-off now is sat here in the front of the MG5, I'm feeling really comfortable. However, sat in the back of the MG5, and that was actually my first experience of the car, it was a little bit firm and a little bit stiff, so that's just something to be aware of with passengers in the car. Now, with electric vehicles, they tend to be pretty refined, with the main intrusions being from tyre roar and wind noise. Now, as you can probably hear, I have got a bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin because this is a poor bit of tarmac, and that's really the main intrusion. Wind noise isn't too bad unless you're driving at 70 miles an hour on a fresh bit of tarmac. Then yes, you can hear the wing mirrors a little bit coming into the cabin, but other than that, no, tyre roar's the main intrusion, and it isn't really that bad. I've actually been really impressed with the refinement levels of the MG5. It's actually a very good long distance cruiser, this. Now when it comes to the handling in the MG5, it's absolutely fine. So as I go around these corners here, there's a little bit of lean and it does hold on pretty respectably, but that's kind of what I was expecting from this type of car. It's not as flat in the cornering as something like a Corsa E, but then again, that's kind of the trade-off you get for having that extra little bit of ride height and soft suspension setup. It is going to roll and lean a little bit in the corners, but because you got the weight nice and low, because of those batteries, it's not really leaning as much as it would be if it had an engine up front. So yeah, it's a very competent handler, but I wouldn't say it was fun and engaging. Now the steering is actually got a nice bit of weight to it, but it's still light enough to make it a doddle to park. And if you put it into sport mode, then it does add a bit of extra weight into the steering. But again, you're not going to feel as hunkered down and connected to the road like a Porsche Taycan. It's just absolutely fine for everyday driving. It's easy to park, easy to maneuver, and actually the steering wheel feels nice in your hands. It's a nice size and there's a good level of leather around the exterior of it. So yeah, handling in the MG5, absolutely fine. Now with my time in the MG5, I have come across a couple of little features I really do like, and also a couple of little niggles as well. Now things I do like is the fact that you can put this into sport mode, but the regen setting stays the same, because I've been driving in its most abrupt regen setting, level 3. So that feature I do like. There's lots of little helpful things as well. So when you press the auto hold button for when you come up to a junction, you don't have to press it every time you get into the MG5. It actually remembers, and I do really like that. Also the fact that when you put it into drive and you're about to set off, it does automatically disengage the handbrake, again saving you a couple of seconds to get you on your journey. Now, little niggles I've come across. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the infotainment system, which isn't the quickest to respond to your inputs. And that also goes with using some of the driver controls, and they come up on the screen. So on the steering wheel, some of the volume buttons and change track can be a little bit hesitant, and I have found myself having to kind of constantly hit the volume button to either make things louder or make things quieter. It just doesn't seem to respond straight away. And the other thing as well that I found is I was driving home at night around about 11:30 after work, and when I put the full beam lights on, I thought a warning light had come up, because on the display was a picture of the lights and it basically said your main beams are on. I already knew that. I turned them on myself, and it also was the fact that it was about 1.5 seconds later that that little display came up, so it wasn't instant. So that's something I would like to see MG start doing with their infotainment system and just the general digital and driver's display, just making them a little bit quicker and a little bit sharper in their response times. But other than that, in terms of the infotainment system and the display, it's been absolutely fine. As I said, the dials are nice and clear and easy to read. But one final niggle, and I'm probably going to mention the fact that it's because I'm a big bear, but I have found that this seat does rub against the center armrest, and every so often I do get a bit of creaking as I'm driving. So I think that's just due to the fact that I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and if you're 5'7" tall but only 3 foot wide, good for you, you probably won't have that issue. But I just thought I'd point it out, because if you are of a larger size and you are driving the MG5, you might find that happening to you. But other than that, I've been really impressed with the MG5. It's a very good all-round family EV that just happens to be in estate. So what are my thoughts on the new MG5 EV estate car? Well, I'm going to be honest, I've been very impressed. You do get an awful lot of car for your money, and not everyone wants an SUV, so going for the MG5 is a really nice alternative. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a bit disappointed that you have to really kind of go for the long range version and the exclusive version really to get the best out of everything with the MG5, because you don't get MG Pilot on this particular version. But to be honest, with a government grant, it's still under £30,000, and that's for the long range version of the MG5 exclusive with all of those added extras. So that's something I'm really impressed with. You get an awful lot of car for your money, considering that its main rivals are the likes of the Peugeot E208 and Corsa E, and the Renault Zoe, and this beats them all in terms of practicality and passenger space. Yes, of course, when you compare it with itself, or the MG5 EV, it does lack in a couple of areas when it comes to practicality. Not everyone wants an SUV, and this is a really nice alternative. It's surprising we've waited so long for an electric vehicle estate car. I mean, I thought that would have been a given, but then again, some people have just decided not to go down that road, but I'm glad MG have. In terms of other negatives, yes, I'm still not convinced with the styling at the front of the MG5, considering, as I said, if you Google MG5, you're going to get some very nice looking cars as alternatives which are not sold in the UK. But that's the thing with the MG5, is I have been, as a whole, very impressed by it. It's a very comfortable, easy car to drive. The ride is surprisingly good. There is a decent amount of tech. Again, you get more safety tech with that long range version, and charging is actually pretty decent as well. You can do some long range driving in the MG5 and it won't take all of your time just to charge it up waiting whilst you're at a service station. So yeah, I really do like the MG5. I do recommend, if you want to get on the EV ladder and you want a practical estate car, this is definitely one of the ones to go for. In fact, MG have got that segment covered. If you want a big electric vehicle that's practical and decent to drive, you can't go wrong. You really can. And you also get a 7-year manufacturer's warranty as well. So that's something for peace of mind with you, because at the moment, MGs, their reliability is a little bit hit and miss. Some of them are coming and they're absolutely fine. Others are coming and they're having a few teething issues. So again, just something to be aware of. But overall, the MG5 is a very good electric vehicle for the cost and the amount of car you get for your money. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new MG5. If you've got any questions whatsoever about the car and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, I'm on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and always recommend you follow me on there for additional content. And of course, guys, stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, maintain your social distancing, and I will catch you all in the next video. So take care and bye-bye.